So the next one will proceed to promises. Okay, so as we move down, things get a little bit complicated, right? Let's move on to promises. And promises, I will take my time and explain it to you. Okay, so with promises, um we are going to dive deeper into this when it comes to asynchronous programming and synchronous programming. But for now, I have a function here which says let me copy this function. Okay, or let me copy this part of the notes. I would like to copy this. Okay, let's move to our index here. Um, then let me explain it to you. All right, so what this function actually does is it's just to double the number. Okay, so you pass in a number and it will double the number for you. Okay, but in so doing, this is what happens inside here. We wait for some time, right? And after that, we check whether the number is actually a number which is integer. Okay, we don't want to, try and multiply or double strings, okay, or objects. Okay, so we just check. If it's not a number, then we reject, which means we return. Okay, by this return we add some flag which is reject. In this case, shows like an error. Okay, and then if actually it's a number, it's gonna pass this end and move on to this session. Okay, and then what we do here is we multiply it by 2 and resolve, which means succeed, right? This is how promises works. Okay, you pass in a parameter. The first one is resolve. This resolve is going to help you to send back the actual um feedback. Okay, and then this reject is going to help you to send an error message. That is basically how the promise works. Okay, so let's try and execute this code. Okay, we've executed the code, and let's come down. Let's come here. So as you can see here, um we have the error here, and it says got a string, which actually we are passing it right here. So we threw an error and then we gave it expected a number but got a string. So that's what you can see here. So this is the error message we are passing. Okay, and we can even make it much nicer if we just remove that and then run it again. Okay, so as you can see, the code ends here, expected a number, right? Yeah, so that's how promises works. Now let's bring it into context, what we are actually trying to do. Okay, which is read from a file. So I'm going to copy this file or this part of the code and then bring it here. Okay, so save. I'll pull up my terminal again, and then here I'm just going to clear and then execute the file. Okay, so as you can see, we have an error says no such file. So let's work on the error message. So inside here, I would like to just say file does not exist, right? Great. And then now let's run it again. Hey, so the code ends here, file doesn't exist. So we've been able to actually handle the error with promise. I hope you are following. So what we are basically doing here is we are just promisifying this. Don't worry about this. We are going to handle this a little bit later. Okay, but just know that we are reading the file. We are passing in this function. Okay, so we are just making this function a promise. Okay, and then we are passing it here, which says read file. Okay, then here it says then. So you call the function and then you pass in dot then. Dot then is very, very important. I forgot to explain it and then just brushed over it, but just know that use the dot then to get the resolved. We spoke about resolved, right? Use the dot then to get the result, and then dot catch to get the error. The error message. Okay, so that is the basic. Or for now, that is the basics of promises. Okay, and this promise would actually help us to handle errors in the right way. We are able to catch the error and pass in some meaningful information or meaningful feedback. Okay, now the next one we are actually going to move to is async await. Okay, and again, promises and async await, we are going to dive deeper when it comes to asynchronous programming and synchronous programming. But for now, let's look at the code structure of async await, okay, which is also very, very interesting. So I'm just going to copy that part of the code, and then let's move on, or let's move into our index file. All right, so now let's look at the structure of the async await. Okay, so this is what happens. You call the function. Okay, so this function is going to take some minutes, or it has promise. Okay, if somebody promises you, you have to wait for it. Okay, so that is basically what you are doing. So here we are using the util to promise. Okay, so we are just passing this function. So this function is coming as a promise. Hey buddy, I'm gonna buy you a chocolate, but you have to wait. Okay, if somebody promises you, you just don't go and then tell you, buy me the chocolate, right? Oh, I promise you I'll buy you this. What you have to do is wait, be patient, right? So that's why we have the wait key here. So the wait key, we have to wait for the end results to come, right? And then we console log it, right? And then again, you can see we're having a try and catch block here. Yeah. So async await has the try and catch block, right? And then here, what you are trying to do is we are trying to catch the results. I mean, the actual results, and console log it here. And if there is an error, we console log it here, correct? And then we have our code ends here. We call this function right here. Okay, what makes this one different is with the async await, you have the async here, and then we have the await here. Okay, so once you want to use the async await method, you have to create a function which has the async. Okay, which trying to say, hey buddy, this function, you have somebody who has promise in there, so you have to know how to deal with it. Okay, so that is basically how this one works. Let's try the code and see. So let's note. Okay, and as you can see, we have the error here. Even though there was an error, it went ahead and then gave us the code ends here, right? Which we can do better by just saying file does not exist. Okay, save this, and then let's try it again. As you can see, file does not exist, and then code ends here. Okay, now let me explain this to you. One of the reasons what makes this one quite different from the previous one, which is the catch block, is with the try and catch block, you just come up with the operation here, okay, and then you catch your error here, okay. But when you are dealing with functions with promises, I mean functions that you have to wait for some time to get your results, it's always advisable to go with the async await method. Okay, for that one you have to wait, and then if it doesn't use the wait, it might execute this code whilst the resource is not yet ready. Okay, now let's move on to the next one, which I think is quite interesting. Okay, and it's also a little bit longer, so I'm going to copy this code. Let me see if I'm actually okay. So I also left some comments on it so that it makes it. So I'm just going to copy this, come down here. Yeah, as I said, whilst we move on, things get a little bit complicated, right? That's why I left some errors messages here. So let's save it and let me explain it to you. Then from there you proceed to. So see the emitters or event emitters as it's a way of, I mean, you go through the code. If there is an error, you just say, okay, emit this error. If there is an error, okay, emit this error, like in that order. Okay, if there is an error, emit it. If there is no error, okay, emit this resource for me. I mean, let me find a better way of explaining this. So if there is an error, just flag it out. Okay, if there is no error, to flag the resource out. I mean, that kind of thing. Yeah, so what you are basically doing here is you are just using events, okay, and then inside the event we are creating a class. We are extending it from the event, and we are adding to the class a new method, right? This method is read file, okay, which is in the path of the file. Okay, and then inside the path of the file, well, within this read file, we call our file system dot read. Okay, passing the file, and then here we have a callback here. If you do remember the callback, right? So we have our error and our data. So we check if there is an error, we emit the error and give it this key. Okay. And then here, if there is no error, we emit the data. Okay, and then we pass it as a string. So that is basically what the emitter does. Okay, so when you come here, you create an object from that class. You set it to on. Okay, so here you listen to any event that goes on in the data. So if you emit data here using this key, it's an event that has happened. So whatever that you pass in here will be received here as data, and then you can console log it here. Okay, and then if you pass in an error, that is, if you emit an error, it comes here, you get the error here, and then you just console log the error here. Okay, and then here we are just calling the method main, and down here we like to call the console end here. Okay, the code ends here. So let's go back to our terminal and let's try and execute it. And as you can see, we have our code ends here, followed by the error in the error message. Okay, which again we can do better by just coming down here and just say, oh, this file does not exist. Okay, now let's go back, let's clear our terminal, let's run it again. As you can see, the code ends here, and then error, and then reading the file. Okay, then we have the file doesn't exist. Okay, yeah, so that is basically a way of handling errors using event emitters. Okay, yeah, so if you could remember, or if you could get this picture, you could realize that getting to the end, some of them actually depends on other. Okay, so this event emitters is actually using callbacks in here, right? And then the async await was also using try and catch blocks in it. Okay, these ones are actually needed when you are handling a lot of complicated operation and all that. Okay, yeah, so I think for now we are good. Using these techniques, we can handle any error that comes in our way and make our code robust, right? Yeah, so if you could clearly see something, you see the program runs from top to down, right? But in all the cases, or all the time, we realize the code ends here comes before this one, which means this one gets executed before this, right? We're going to talk about it when it gets to async, synchronous programming. Don't worry. Okay, so I hope you really enjoyed this video. If you did, kindly click on the subscribe button, like this video, share this video with friends, and see you in the next one. Happy coding.